Morning here on Good Morning NFC East, and it's always a beautiful day when I get to talk to Mike Gill, which is every Monday, and usually every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on his show, The Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN in Atlantic City. Mike Gill, I got to give you your props, man. You went with the Bengals. I almost convinced myself to take them on the Bengals pregame show Sunday morning. I didn't. I highly regret it.
Bengals have been my number one team in my Fine Five for about the last 7 weeks. I think they're the most complete, best team, and probably the most dominant. Well, I mean, as for the opponent, I mean, the Eagles' performance was obviously the most dominating performance of the weekend. I mean, they just absolutely whipped the Giants. But in terms of opponent, Buffalo was a legitimate Super Bowl contender. The Giants were not, and the Bengals disposed of them. They've been my number one team for about the last 7 weeks, and you saw why on Sunday, I guess. When they play, they played Sunday, right? Yeah,
they were the early game. So, but you know what I was impressed with Cincinnati? Just talking a little bit about the Cincinnati-Buffalo game. I was impressed, again, 3 backup offensive linemen. And they demoralized that front. I knew Buffalo's pass rush was bad without Von Miller. But they just straight up beat them to a pulp. Joe Mixon had his way all day long. Joe Burrow wasn't touched. I noticed early in the game, I'm like, wow, this is going to be like week 17. This could be a beatdown.
Their left tackle was making his first start ever at left tackle in a playoff game on the road in the snow against Buffalo. Gave up 1 pressure in the game. I mean, Cincinnati right now, it's just the most – I said all year, look, Buffalo to me couldn't run the ball. You mentioned Miller. Their defense had just something lacking on that side of the ball. And they turned the ball over too much. I mean, that's one of their big problems. They turned the ball over too much because they don't have a run game. I don't know if they can't run. They just choose not to. I've said it, and, I've had people say, look, you're wrong about them. They can run. Look at their yards per carry. A lot of that comes from Josh Allen. They just choose not to run the ball. It's such a one-dimensional offense, and that kind of caught up to them. I think the same problem with Kansas City. They did run the ball well, Kansas City, against Jacksonville. Pacheco had like 95 yards, but they have not run the ball much all year. They don't have an outside threat to go down the field. Defensively, I think they're just okay. I think Cincinnati's better than both of those teams on offense and on defense. So Cincinnati, to me, has been in my mind, the clear favorite on the AFC side. The NFC is a much different conversation.
Yeah, before we get to the NFC conversation here, I do want to talk about Kansas City for just a little bit here. I think, though, these offensive linemen Cincinnati has, and I'm assuming it's going to be those 3 next week, as well as they played, Kansas City's pass rush is a lot better than Buffalo's. They got 55 sacks this year. They know how to get to the quarterback. This is Spagnuolo's best defense since he's been in Kansas City. Cincinnati's a better team on paper, at least in my opinion, especially with Patrick Mahomes on a high ankle sprain. But they can't play that card they usually play. No one believes in us. Because guess what? You've beaten Kansas City 3 times now. All 3 times. Including last year's AFC Championship game. I'm really going to wonder how they're going to handle they're not the favorite, according to Vegas, but I really want to know how they're actually going to handle being the quote-unquote team to beat.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think it matters. If you look at Joe Burrow and that team, he's the guy, they follow him, and he just doesn't seem to care who they're playing. I love his comment after the game. Hopefully everybody gets their refund. The Bengals took it personal that they weren't really considered in that whole situation that unraveled after the Damar Hamlin night. And they went on the road in the snow and took care of business, and they did it handily, and they seemed to do it with a smile. I mean, they seem to be pretty happy that they have kind of caused all this mess. And that they were kind of the forgotten team in it. Look, I said before, my one concern with Cincinnati was for them to get back to the Super Bowl. They won 3 road games last year in the playoffs. They would have to win 2 more this year, which would mean this team would win 5 straight playoff road games. And guess what? I think they can do it now that you've seen them and see their mindset and their mentality. This organization has taken a complete 360. They were one of the worst run organizations. The ownership group, notoriously cheap. And guess what? they're not cheap. They're just getting by right now because the quarterback is on a very friendly deal because he's in that first deal. Now, there are reports that they are about to approach him about getting a new big contract. But this organization has been one of the worst-run organizations in football. You got to give the coach, Zach Taylor, who, he's one of these Sean McVay disciples that everybody felt, hey, just because you got a handshake one time from Sean McVay that you get a head coaching job. Well, this Zach Taylor is showing that he, we talk about culture in an organization. Maybe Zach Taylor has changed the culture and the mindset of that organization and should be given more credit, because I don't ever hear his name brought up when we talk about great head coaches. But they were way better prepared than Buffalo.
Yeah, Zach Taylor is a good head coach. I will say that. I'll tell you who's a really good head coach who probably should be getting more interviews to become a head coach, and that's the defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. That guy, he just has that defense. That defense gets better and better every week. I've been pounding the table, telling people how good Sam Hubbard is for years. And I remember he signed the 4-year, $40 million extension last year, and I said, oh man, he's going to be underpaid. Like that guy can play. And then you brought in Trey Hendrickson to go along with it. That team they just seem to get better every single year defensively, which makes them dangerous. But you're right, Mike. It's just, I wanted to believe in the Bengals for pretty much this entire playoff run. And I just went with conventional wisdom, I guess. Buffalo was 13-1 at home in the postseason. You're not going to be, even though I knew their pass rush wasn't good, even though I knew they couldn't run the ball like the yards per carry says or the yards per game says, I just said, well, I think the clock's going to strike midnight. Well, now I'm wondering if Kansas City can actually beat this team, because if Patrick Mahomes can, I never want to hear any debate on who the best quarterback in the NFL is. It will be Patrick Mahomes.
Well, I got a couple things on this. I mean, number one, I don't know how Patrick Mahomes is going to play in this game, nor the Super Bowl if they made it. I mean, quite frankly, you have a high ankle sprain. That's a 3-4 week injury. I don't know how he plays. If he does, I don't know how he's Patrick Mahomes. If he wins the game playing on this injury, then yes, I mean, there's not a lot of discussion there. I don't see it happening. I said all along, I think of the 3 teams in the AFC that were the legitimate Super Bowl contenders, I think Kansas City's the weakest. I think Cincinnati goes in there and blows their doors off, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a competitive game. They have beaten this team both times they've played. I think this team is just more complete. And you're giving me now, there's no way that he is 100% healthy in the game. So, okay, maybe he's trying to play. They don't have enough weapons. They just don't have enough. Cincinnati's a better team than them, flat out. That's just on the surface, they're better. The spread is telling you Cincinnati's better than Kansas City. It's only like a point. It was a pick 'em. The game opened as a pick 'em. Vegas is telling you Cincinnati is flat out better than Kansas City is. I don't disagree. I think Kansas City, of the Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati trio, is the weakest of that group. So I think Cincinnati goes in there and basically blows their doors off. I don't think that game's competitive. Cincinnati, to me, is far better than Kansas City. Kansas City is a Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, one-trick pony. They don't have very much more in that bag on offense, and they're going to need it against Lou Anarumo's defense, and I don't think they have it, man.
Now, we got to go over the NFC side here, because I think this is going to be one hell of a football game. I'm excited. I've talked to a lot of 49ers beat writers already. I said, you know what? This game's going to be fun, because you're getting the number 1 offense in the NFC versus number 1 defense in the NFC. And the Eagles are right there with them, by the way, in terms defensively. But I still think the difference Sunday in the NFC Championship, we'll do an early preview here, Brock Purdy. I think that is the major difference. I have no doubt Jalen Hurts can do what he needs to do against the 49ers defense. But Brock Purdy finally faced a team that could get to him. And he did not look the same as that guy who played against Seattle and all the weaker opponents he played. It seems like you could get to Brock Purdy and get him off his spot. Those turnovers are coming.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit. I mean, the 49ers are better than Minnesota was in 2017. But that 2017 Vikings team got to the NFC Championship game with Chase Daniel. Was Chase Daniels the quarterback of that team? Who was the quarterback?
Case Keenum.
Yeah, Case Keenum. Sorry, Case Keenum. I knew that Chase Daniels didn't sound right as soon as I said it. But Case Keenum was this great story. They were 13-3. He had led them to the NFC Championship game, and then he was Case Keenum. It was like, how is this guy getting them there? I think Brock Purdy's been – look, and quite frankly, you're right about some of the stuff you said, but he made a couple of just great throws. I mean, he got off that throw he makes to Kittle, that Kittle ends up catching with one hand. I mean, it's still just he had a throw – to make a first down at one point. I mean, he ripped that thing in there, and you're like, oh, my God, how is this kid doing this? But it's a different animal if you're doing that on the road in the NFC Championship game. There were times where, you could see him, and you're like, is this kid even realize what's going on? And then you could say, maybe it's finally starting to hit him. But then he'd come back and give an answer. The problem is I just don't see him going on the road and continuing this play. I feel like it's finally going to catch up to him. The only other alternative to this is, every 20 years you see something special like these kind of guys come out of. And the only other thing is, if we're watching the start of the next story, that would be it. Because otherwise he's going to have to come down to earth at some point, you would think. Unless this is that 20-year thing where here comes that next story that nobody saw coming.
This is what I keep saying about, like, I agree with you with the 20-year story thing, but I always got to tell people about these 20-year stories sometimes. I've watched the 1999 NFC Championship game plenty of times. It was Kurt Warner versus Sean King. Now, Kurt Warner was a rookie. Kurt Warner did not play well in that game against a very good Bucs defense. And Sean King played horribly. And remember, Sean King was a rookie and made the NFC Championship game and was kind of like Brock Purdy. He was playing really well. Not at the high level Brock Purdy was, but he was playing well enough to get Tampa Bay to the NFC Championship game. And he just fell flat on his face. Tom Brady in 2001. Tom Brady led the Patriots to the Super Bowl. I said, hold on a second. He did not play well in the NFC Championship game and got hurt, bench, whatever the story was. But Drew Bledsoe came in and won that game for them. There will be no more pressure on the Eagles defensive line than there will be Sunday. I mean, this is the highest of pressures. You have 75 sacks this season combined with the postseason. That is the third most in NFL history. You have to get to this guy. You have to tell this guy, I don't care if you have Christian McCaffrey. I don't care if you have Deebo Samuel, George Gill, Brandon Ayuk, whoever. You are Brock Purdy. You are not going to beat us.
Yeah, look, I think here's the difference. One, the 49ers, the offensive line is pretty good. So the pressure that you got against the Giants, I would imagine is going to get turned down a notch. So what game plan does John Gannon come up with? I thought he had a great game plan in this particular game. He took those slants. He sat on those slants all day long. He really took, that game. Hodgkins had one catch for 3 yards. He had been kind of their go-to guy. Darius Slayton, believe it or not, Slayton and Brown, that combination averaged over 10 yards a catch. They were the fourth best yards per catch tandem in all of football this year when they threw the ball to Darius Slayton. He had no impact in the game. The Eagles, I thought the Reddick-Neal was my big matchup on Friday, and I said game Reddick to Reddick. He's going to dominate that matchup. He was having the time of his life out there, Hassan Reddick, because Evan Neal was so overmatched. That should not be the case this week. With the San Francisco offensive line. They're just a better unit. This is just a flat-out better team. I mean, the Giants, I didn't think this game would be close. I had no concern about the Giants in this game. They're just talent-wise just not ready. Great story. Good for them. Not ready. San Francisco, different story. You saw yesterday. If that's the kind of game it's going to be, Purdy doesn't have to play great, and the game will still possibly be close. That's the difference. The Dallas defense played really well yesterday. I think they were physical. They got Purdy moving. But the San Francisco defense is the story because they only gave up 12 points to Dallas. Philly gave up 40 points to Dallas the last time they played. Now, I don't think that's indicative of what this game could be, but Purdy doesn't have to play a great game for them to win. That's the difference, right? He doesn't have to be great for them. I think we all just assume, hey, this guy's going to come in here. He's not going to play great. That doesn't necessarily mean they still can't win the game, though.
I think this is where I think Eagles offense is going to get tested. They have to find a way to get 20 points off this team. And I know that's been hard for San Francisco, but the last, and you know what, I digress on that because they did shut Dallas down. But before that, the questions were with that defense. Well, hold on a second. The last time you played a worthy adversary, you gave up 40 to them. And that was Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I think the Eagles offense is just as good, if not better than the Chiefs. In fact, they are better than the Chiefs. I'm going to be quite honest with you. Their offense is better than the Chiefs this year. Forget the statistics. Their offense is better than the Chiefs, especially if the Eagles can run the ball. If the Eagles can run the ball half of what they did on Saturday night, I think the 49ers defense could be in for a long afternoon, Mike.
They had a game not too long ago. I think they played the Raiders. I think they played the Raiders in that game. I'm pretty sure. And they gave up 34 points. I think the Raiders maybe had some sort of a blueprint. You know, they could run the ball. If you can control, and this is where the Eagles are very good. It's underrated because no one ever talks about the interior of an offensive line. You might talk about an offensive line not being good. It's generally the tackles you're talking about. But the interior of the Eagles offensive line is so good. They won the game the other night. I thought Kelsey, Dickerson, and Sayamala were the difference in that game. They dominated in the interior of the line. And the ability for Kelsey to get the hands on with Dickerson and then get off the block and then get to that next level. They win in the middle of that line. I think that's an area where you can go after San Francisco. Now, they have very good linebackers. Fred Warner, you saw yesterday. I was so impressed watching him in coverage. I mean, the play he's running down the field with CeeDee Lamb. You see what kind of athlete he is. But I think the Eagles can win in the interior of the line here. And really, I mean, they ran for 268 yards the other day against the Giants. And by the way, which was second in team history, only 1949 did they have more rushing yards than they did the other day. I think they can duplicate that and really beat up this team in the middle of the line and make it that kind of game if they have to. I mean, that's the difference to me. The Eagles can win any style of game. I think San Francisco to win this game needs a game like yesterday. If they're going to go into Philly and win, it's not going to be 38-34. I think it's 17-12, 19, like it was yesterday for them. So that's why I think Philadelphia, if they say, you know what, we'll play a nasty, fist fight with you. Let's just control the interior of this game again. And I thought that's where they beat the Giants up. They just crushed the Giants in the middle of the offensive line.
I got to look at the 49ers schedule again because I kind of throw out the first 7 games because they didn't have Christian McCaffrey. I know they were 3-4. I kind of been looking at their last 12.
Well, they won 10 in a row. Now they've won 12 in a row.
Yeah, 12 in a row. It's their longest win streak since 1984, which, by the way, they shut down Dan Marino and won the Super Bowl that year. But I digress here. I think another mismatch here could be the Eagles, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith versus their cornerbacks and their secondary. I don't think the 49ers have seen a wide receiver tandem like that. So, again, this is where the Eagles' offensive line comes in. If they can protect Jalen Hurts, I think there are some big plays to be made down the field.
Yeah, well, we saw that last night. I mean, CeeDee Lamb goes up and makes a great catch after they're highlighting that he gets his fingers taped. They go shooting down the field with him the very next play, and he makes an unbelievable catch. I thought Dalton Schultz, I know, he made a couple boneheaded decisions, not getting out of bounds, not getting the foot down, but he made some catches that now I know it's late in the game and maybe, but still those are important parts of that game where the tight end seems to be a spot. I think Ward's a guy that you can go after and the Eagles have the talent on the outside. So yeah, this defense for San Francisco, what makes them the best defense in many people's mind is their physicality up front. They're very big and physical up front. They got pass rushers with Bosa, but here's the thing, I think the Eagles tackles, you've got them. They got Bosa. You've got your 2 guys. So you've got to hope your guys win that battle. I mean, just because they have a premier pass rusher, you have premier guys too. So that should be a neutralized battle. Bosa did not have a sack in the game yesterday. So Dallas did a good job of shutting him down. Their defense is physical up front, but I think you're right. I think they can be beat down the field. So this goes back to what I said. The Eagles can pick their style if they want. If they want to run the ball, they'll win that battle up front. The Eagles' offensive line is the best in the football for me, both technically and physically. They can beat you both ways like that. And if San Francisco is going to sell out for the run, I think the Eagles can take shots down the field, and they should win those battles. It should be fun. I know that, but look, they got beat up in that game. The physicality, Philadelphia, they were having tea and crimpets with the Queen against the Giants in the second half of that game. I mean, there was no physicality for the Giants. They threw up the white flag. San Francisco, I mean, they're going to be like Mick Foley getting thrown off the cage at Hell in the Cell, man. Their bodies are going to be beat up after that game's over.
That felt like Royal Rumble last night. Also, I know I'm going to hear it on social media because I'm one of the bigger Nick Bosa advocates in terms of him being a really great football player. But I have had people say, Hassan Reddick should be Defensive Player of the Year. And I'm like, whoa. Did you guys not see a play of Nick Bosa this year? Like, did we forget Nick Bosa exists? Nick Bosa carried that 49ers defense a lot this year. And he deserves all the respect he gets. By the way, he's better in the run against Hassan Reddick. This is not taking anything away from Hassan Reddick, who just he balled out all year. He balled out Saturday night. He's probably going to ball out in the NFC Championship game just because that's how he is. But Hassan Reddick got Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Josh Sweat, Robert Quinn, Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph. I tell people this all the time. If you can name me 5 other 49ers defensive linemen, I'll shut up.
Listen, I think Bosa had like 18 and a half, 19 sacks. I mean, I don't have any problem. It's one of those things where if you tell me Bosa wins it, okay, I don't really want to argue with you there. I thought Reddick somebody put out a graphic and said, who's the defensive player of the month of December? And Reddick wasn't in the graphic. And I was like, dude, how is Reddick not in this picture? I mean,
he won Defensive Player of the Month in December.
He ended up winning it, but I said, how is Reddick not in this picture? He had 2 sacks in 3 straight games. He was absolutely dominant. I thought yesterday, though, or Saturday, I asked on my show Friday, look, A.J. Brown was the big ticket item. He has made some impacts that have won them games. Not that Reddick hasn't, but in this game, Reddick was your big ticket defensive item. Win them the game. He dominated. Hassan Reddick was everywhere. He had a sack and a half. He could have had 4. I mean, he stood off the page he stood off the TV this weekend more than any defensive player, period. Yep. He was the most dominating defensive disruptor of the divisional round. So that's not going to win you Defensive Player of the Year because they don't vote on that. But if you did, that performance there put him over the top for Bosa. Bosa's impact yesterday, not nearly as big as Reddick was on Saturday.
And he faced a good tackle. I mean, I got to give Tyler Smith credit for what he was able to do this year for Dallas. And I know the 49ers moved Bosa around, but Tyler Smith had a pretty good game against Nick Bosa yesterday. Nick Bosa got some pressure on there, but everybody was getting on Micah Parsons. I thought Micah Parsons actually played a pretty solid game yesterday. Yeah,
he did. I mean, everybody's going to look at the play where, the old Reggie White where he's tossing the offensive lineman. Here's the thing. Late in that season, Parsons, the sack numbers weren't there. Not that that's like the biggest indicator, but he was not on the same level as Reddick was.
Reddick was way better than him.
Right. As much as we look at the names and it's Parsons because he talks and he's a guy that everybody knows and he had that great year. He was not better than Hassan Reddick. He was not more of a disruptor. He was not more impactful. I don't know that there was in the biggest month of the year. Now, the Eagles lost twice in that big month. That's the problem. Reddick was outstanding. The Eagles lost 2 games, though. But he was a defensive player of the month in the month of December. But you can make an argument that him and Bosa were the 2 best defensive players, and that's including Parsons, who many people would just by default put into that category.
Hassan Reddick to me he's been incredible the whole second half of the year. And it took him maybe 3 or 4 games to get his feet wet. But once that Washington game hit in week 3, the guy's been off the charts. Right? 16 sacks, 5 forced fumbles. I don't remember a pass rusher having that dominant of a season since Hugh Douglas in 2000. And remember, Hugh Douglas was all over the place. And he made an impact those playoffs, if you remember, with that sack on Sean King, again, that forced fumble and starting that win over Tampa Bay. That's how I feel Hassan Reddick. I've literally spent a whole quarter in the press box watching Hassan Reddick on Saturday night. I was just like, man, watch him against Evan Neal. I was saying to Andrew Pacheco, man, watch him against Evan Neal. This is fun. That was fun to watch.
I'll tell you, Jeff, that was my matchup to watch on Friday, and I said Reddick is going to whip him. I mean, it's not going to be a fair fight. Evan Neal, Rough day at the office, rough year at the office. Evan Neal, look, the Giants, everybody kind of thinks they're going in the right direction. I do too, because I think they have the right people in place. They have some really tough decisions. The Daniel Jones decision, I don't envy them on. You got to decide on what to do with Saquon Barkley. People don't re-sign running backs in this league, and if you don't bring Barkley back, what is that team? Their receiving core is dreadful. The receiving free agent class, not very good. So I think the Giants are moving in the right direction. They feel like, where Philadelphia was last year. They made the playoff. They actually won a game. Philly didn't even do that, but they won a game with just a limited roster. But Philly had the goods to go out and do what they did in the offseason and improve. Can the Giants, because of the decisions they have to make, they have to, like last year, the Eagles had to decide, is Jalen Hurts the guy or should we go out and get someone? The Giants have the same decision. But their difference is they have to also decide on what to do with the running back spot. And that's a decision that nobody in the NFL wants to pay for. So while the Giants feel like they're right there, they've got a couple of really key choices or decisions that they're going to have to make. And then look, the Eagles went out and added James Bradbury. Why? Because the Giants didn't want to pay him. So the Eagles were able to get that. They make a trade for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which I think was a really big key trade. They went out and got Kaiser White on a one-year deal. Can the Giants also make those supplementary type of moves to advance this team? I'm not so sure that those moves are out there to make, or if they have the – look, Howie Roseman was the guy that everybody hated. I'm glad I was never a Howie hater. This guy runs circles around these teams when putting teams. Are you going to make the right choice and best signing every single time? No. But we want to crucify people because they make mistakes. It's, do you learn from your mistakes? And this guy doesn't only learn from them. He absolutely blast home runs the last two off seasons in fixing those mistakes. That's why the Eagles are here, and I'm interested to see if the Giants are able to do it, because I think while they look like they're moving in the right direction and they have good people in place, I don't know that the moves are there for them to fix this thing as fast as the Eagles did.
So on Saquon Barkley's biggest play of the night, the 39-yard run, this is where I kind of made my decision on him, where they should bring him back or not. I think 4 years ago, Saquon Barkley scored on that play. He was that much faster. He was that much better. He was caught. And I said, hold on a second. You're going to pay him? He was caught. That does not happen. That is not Saquon Barkley. That is not the Saquon Barkley I watched at Penn State. That is not the Saquon Barkley I watched before the ACL injury. I made my decision there. I don't think I pay him.
It's a great point. Look, here's the problem. You have to make a decision on Barkley in an offseason where I don't know where you're going to get a receiver. The free agent class is not great. So then you're going to have to figure out, well, what's our offense going to look like if we have these receivers and don't have a running game? I don't know. I mean, outside of making a trade for a receiver, I mean, does Devontae Adams want to get traded? I know Hopkins looks like he's going to be traded. Can the Giants be creative enough to make a deal to get that level of receiver? I don't know, man. So that's where they have to go back to. Well, what centric offense do we want to be? I think Daniel Jones could be similar to Hurts, where Hurts was just okay last year. I was willing to give him another year. I saw enough to say, I'll give you another year, because I think he works hard. I think Hurts had the inside here to show me I can get better. I don't know about Daniel Jones there. I'm not around him enough. But I think Jones showed enough this year that if he, like Hurts, got enough weapons, that could elevate him too. So if I'm the Giants, I'm focused on trying to get more weapons for Jones. If I have to make the decision, I'm clearly going Jones over Barkley and trying to get Jones more weapons. And then, I got to try to find a running back, which in this league, you can find a guy that you can throw back there and get 900 yards, by accident. So I definitely would go Jones and try to get him weapons before I go bring back Barkley.
Now another team in the NFC East that isn't playing anymore, the Cowboys. They have to come to Jesus with a couple things here. And one of them is their quarterback. I have a feeling now, more than ever, the Cowboys are always going to be good, but not great with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I mean, he makes it 2 interceptions yesterday, 2 key, and I think Jerry Jones, subtly said, look, the turnovers cost us in the game. Dak Prescott is what he is. He's a middle-of-the-road quarterback. He's the guy, I always say, there's good players, there's average players, there's great players. The good player can be great some days, but a lot of times he's just good. And the good player can be average or bad on some games, but most times he's just good. The problem is if you're just good and not great, more times you're going to be average or bad than you're going to be great. Dak Prescott is great 3-4 times a year. He's good probably 10 times a year, but he's average or bad the rest. And he is average or bad in the most inopportune moments, it seems like. He's good, but he's average and bad more than he's great. And that's the problem for them. They got a great roster. In fact, I thought that they were going to take a step back this year because I thought, they lost Amari last offseason. They made some losses because of financial decisions, because of the ridiculous contract they gave to Zeke Elliott. They are bad. They're a good drafting franchise. They do a good job at drafting and finding talent. They're not good in free agency. They do not make good business decisions. And again, their coaching staff, it comes down to it every year. We say, when is that coaching staff going to rear their ugly head? I think the coordinators do a fine job, Quinn. But here's the thing. People act like you got to make Dan Quinn the head coach. He was not a good head coach in Atlanta either. Some guys are just good coordinators. Dan Quinn is one of them. If you make him a head coach, you're asking for mediocrity. But here's the problem. Their coaching staff cost them a possibility of winning that game yesterday. And I don't understand. Like I said this to a Cowboy fan, and he comes at me on Twitter, and I said, well, here's the problem. Cowboy fans enable their team way too much. If that was any team, there's 2 minutes and 45 seconds left in that game. It's 4th down. They didn't get that punt off until 2:10. And when San Francisco fielded the punt, there was 2:05 left in the game. You have to get that punt off immediately. They wasted 40 seconds because McCarthy doesn't know what he wants to do. He's not hustling the team on the field. There's no sense of urgency. They get out there to punt that football. That last play ended at 2:45. They did not kick that ball until 2:10 in the 4th quarter. You got to kick that ball at 2:40, have them field the ball. You take your timeouts before the 2-minute warning. You get the 2-minute warning, and then after 2 minutes, you get that ball back. It's a different game. They didn't get that ball back until what? There was like 30 seconds. It was just horribly run and it's every year. They have tons of talent, totally butchered it with the coaching staff. Here's the thing with Dallas. Unless they have like Pollard, he's a free agent. Who knows what that injury is? Zeke will be gone. CD's a nice player. I don't think he's a number one that can lead a team. He shows flashes. They need another player on the other side. Their defense is very good, but you can run the ball on them. They take too many chances in the secondary. They're still a couple players short, but with Dak Prescott, he has to be great on the day where you need him to be great, and he hasn't shown he can do that. So I think you're right. This is a team that's good and going to be good, but until they make that difference-making move, they're just a step behind these other teams.
And I agree with you with the secondary, too. When they lost Anthony Brown, they showed their lack of depth at cornerback. Trayvon Diggs cannot tackle. We were joking in the CBS room last night. When was the last time Trayvon Diggs made a tackle, if he's ever made a tackle?
To me, Diggs is one of the more overrated players out there. He gets a lot of interceptions. We love it. It's like watching SportsCenter and seeing a guy dunk, 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 dunk. But when you need him to make the key three in the corner, which is what the game is today, he can't shoot. I mean, it's like Ben Simmons. Look, I'm no Ben Simmons hater. but Ben can only do certain things. Diggs can make a big pick, but teams go after Diggs. You shouldn't be going after the team's best guy. No, teams want to go after him because they know he takes way too many chances. And you can't have, your best guy in the secondary be also a guy that gives up the big plays. I thought they exceeded my expectations this year because I thought their window closed when they started to lose guys last year. But give them credit. They rebuilt back up, on the line with Smith. I think Smith was a guy that a lot of people questioned. He was, in college, he had a lot of penalty problems. He came in and really gave them something on the offense. Their offensive line, though, in the interior stinks. They're unplayable. In the middle of that line, they're not good. I don't know what their free agent situation is yet. I have to take a look further at what their decisions they have. But I think right now, the NFC is interesting because you got Philly, who got they got 20 free agents, Philly does, and some very, very, very key ones. San Francisco, I think you're going to see some of these teams. Detroit's going to start, I think, elevating themselves up. They've been kind of a doldrum for a while. I think you're going to see some new blood start to recycle from the bottom to the middle to the top now in the NFC. So Philadelphia right now, the window, they better jump through this thing because they got 20 free agents, and they're not easy decisions, and they're not going to be cheap. And, oh, by the way, you have the quarterback bill coming, and it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a big bill. When you're calling the man Michael Jordan, you just gave his agent a little bit more fuel for the fire to say, hey, man, you want to pay Michael Jordan? Yeah, you called him Michael Jordan. So this is going to be a very, very interesting situation if the Eagles don't get to the big game and win it.
I'll tell you what, before I let you sign off, Mike Gill, just from me and you with Jalen Hurts' agent, I'm sure she put a big smile on her face when Nick Sirianni made that comment. Mike Gill, I will see you later tonight on the Sports Bash. We're going to have a good time tonight, my friend.
Yeah, I'm over at Ocean today. So if you're in the AC area, stop out to Ocean, say hello. 2 to 6, you can listen to our reaction to this and everything, man. It's going to be a fun week. Eagles, Niners, looking forward to it, man.
That sounds great. Thanks for coming on, Mike.
All right, man.
And before I wrap up Good Morning NFC East, I think Eagles fans will enjoy this story. So, guy I used to work with, he writes for the Cowboys now, writes for the actual team. Good guy. I love talking football with him. We talk a lot about our teams and this and that. Ultimate Cowboys fan. He tweets every 5 seconds. He has not tweeted since they lost last night. Just think about that. That's your Cowboys fan right there. This is Good Morning NFC East. Birds 365 is coming up next.